I want to talk testing. Actually, I don't, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those SATs, those ACTs. Now, this idea, there's test optional, there's test blind. So, Rob, as a student,
Yeah.
as a parent, how do you decide what you should and shouldn't be doing and how important it is anymore?
Yeah, Elizabeth, this is the million-dollar question. And I'm on the road most nights talking to students and parents, and this idea of test optional. And first of all, we should just get the definitions down right.
Yeah.
Test optional means that you needn't submit your SAT and ACT scores, but it doesn't mean that you're prohibited from submitting those SAT and ACT scores. And that's the part that over the last 2 years of time, I feel like a lot of students and parents are not quite getting, because it feels really good that you don't have to take the SAT and ACT anymore. But the reality is that so many schools are still accepting those SAT and ACT scores should you submit them. And then you're right, there's the nomenclature that says test blind or test free, which means that if you're applying to those schools that are test blind or test free, that they absolutely cannot honor the SAT and ACT scores. So the California state system, the CSU system in California is one of the largest really that has embraced that idea of test free. But every other school that's test optional will still consider your test scores if you submit.
And, I guess, Dr. Nader, one of the other questions, too, especially for kids in high school right now, how much of an effect will their pandemic experiences or lack thereof, because the club wasn't happening or the extracurricular wasn't, or there was a drop off in possibly in grades because, kids didn't do that well remote? How much of that is taken into account when it comes to colleges?
I want to assure the students and the families that are out there that all colleges and universities understand, particularly in many of the Northeast states, what students have been through for 2+ years. I do think it's incumbent upon students and families to explain that as they're applying to colleges and universities, that prior to the pandemic, they may have had a great level of engagement with clubs or organizations of various sorts, or were unable to get courses in this environment that they may have otherwise. And I'm going to reiterate this time and time again. This is a buyer's market for students right now, particularly in the Northeast. Colleges want to hear the stories of the students who are interested in attending, and they'll be keenly focused on that. So don't hesitate to say, and we have dealt with some of this here at Farmingdale, here's how the pandemic may have affected my grades in terms of having to study remotely. Here's how I was unable to be involved in things that in 2019 were integral to my life. Say those things, tell your story when you go out there. You're selling yourself to the colleges and institutions, and they want to hear those stories.
All right, Rob,
I couldn't agree more on Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I couldn't agree more, Dr. Nader. Yeah, and he says it so perfectly. This idea of telling your story, and I think for all of your watchers and listeners, this idea of college admission being a human process. There's certainly quantitative metrics in the process, and I know we're going to touch on them, the idea of your high school transcript and your SAT and ACT scores and AP exam scores, but then we understand that we're admitting humans and not widgets, so the idea of this being a human process, telling your story, as Dr. Nader said, this is crucial in the process, and one that hopefully diffuses some of the stress and makes a confident college shopper and their parents moving through the process.